Day 837 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 519,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,190 in the past day. Then, as for hardware losses, 10 tanks, 13 APVs, and a whopping 51 artillery. With artillery now eclipsing that 90% mark over the weekend. And due to that milestone, it's high time that I complete this project, which, looking back, as it turns out, I only started this percentage figure inclusion about 60 days ago. So the updates you'll see soon will include additions to almost every field, with the exception of the more replenishable items such as, for instance, UAVs, Shahed drones. But I'll also be adding percentage ranges from conservative to more liberal figures so that we're more attuned to the best and worst case scenarios, so to speak, as with the original intent of this project from just 2 months ago. As such, in the interim, you might not see these figures posted every day until then, but it should be worth the wait. Then headed straight to the map, because in a bold overnight offensive in occupied Crimea, Ukraine launched a successful strike against Russian forces targeting an S-400 anti-aircraft missile division in the Jankoy area and 2 S-300 divisions near Chernomorsk and Yevpatoria. The Ukrainian military triumphantly reported that none of their missiles were intercepted by the supposedly highly effective enemy air defense, as they injected a note of well-earned sarcasm. In response to the strikes, Russian occupation forces hastily closed the Kerch Bridge, while local social media channels buzzed with reports of explosions. The Telegram channel Crimean Wind recorded a fire at the Russian military airfield in Vardisk, home to a significant number of military warehouses. Also, fires ignited across Jankoy, Feodosia, and Chernomorsk districts, and analysis by Crimean Wind using Google Maps suggested these blazes were in open fields, likely the sites of air defense launches and radar stations. And there was a lot of activity overnight, with eyewitnesses reporting the activity of Russian air defense systems near the Saki district, and noting 8 explosions in Krasnoperkosp, and 5 to 6 more in Pervomaiska. Also, Telegram channel from Russian media outlet Astra confirms some of the information reported, stating the attack involved at least 10 ATACMS missiles, none of which were intercepted. Quite the admission there. Then going on to state specifically, 4 missiles hit Jankoy, damaging 2 radar stations, another 4 missiles struck the Yevpatoria region, damaging further military equipment, and 2 additional missiles hit the Chernomorska district, damaging 2 radars and 2 S-300 complexes. So this is quite serious. And as you can see on the screen now, this satellite image is from 4 days ago, with Russian air defenses seen stationed in the northwestern region of Crimea, in the fields. Then to add to all of that, reports from the Atesh partisan group in the peninsula have stated that Russian air defense soldiers have been ordered to evacuate their families from Crimea to the Russian southern military district. For example, much further east out of the peninsula into the Rostov-Don region and other regions there. And this development also coincides with the movement of Russian air defense systems in the Belgorod region, which poses a security threat in Crimea, leaving it without proper coverage. Because then, in parallel, the Russian armed forces are creating new mobile air defense teams to combat UAVs using the Zu-23-2 anti-aircraft twin-barreled 23mm platforms. I knew it. I've postulated this before. Russia being forced to switch gears to move to more conventional projectiles of Soviet vintage to assist with their air defense shortfalls. You see, as soon as Russia rolls out more air defense systems to Crimea, ATACMS missiles perform their intended purpose. Once again. And so a lack of modern air defenses for Russia within Crimea means Ukraine can exploit that vulnerability to carry out even more vigorous and decisive operations, taking out every military site it sees fit, making it unsustainable for Russia to hold on to the peninsula. And my old nickel's worth of advice for Putin quite some time ago now was that Russia should just pull out of everywhere, with the exception of the Donbass, and focus their efforts right there. But of course, Putin's ego is far too big for that, to perform yet another considerable gesture of goodwill like that one. So his army is really stuck between a rock and a hard place. Then headed north on the map into Russia proper, as a Ukrainian military aircraft reportedly struck a target on Russian soil for the first time since the conflict began. As a Ukrainian military source disclosed that on Sunday, a Russian command center near the border city of Belgorod was hit in a precision airstrike. While damage assessments are ongoing, the anonymous source confirmed it was a quote-unquote direct hit by a Ukrainian Air Force munition on the Russian command node. Now previously, Ukraine had launched multiple drone strikes deep into Russian territory. However, the use of a manned aircraft to strike targets inside of Russia is relatively unheard of when it pertains to the Western arms. But of course, notably, the United States and France have recently permitted Ukrainian forces to use Western-supplied arms to strike military targets inside of Russia, from where attacks are being launched against Ukraine. But also, previous to this, the UK Storm Shadow missiles were already said to have set this precedent, although whether that instead referred to strikes on Russian ships in the Black Sea, or perhaps even referring to the seaport of Taman near the Kerch Bridge on the Russian side, is unclear. Now, of course, to add to all of this, Ukraine has already used Western arms such as HIMARS, GIMLARS rockets on specific military targets just across the border to Ukraine. But the usage of, for example, a Ukrainian Su-24 firing a Scalp or Storm Shadow missile is extremely noteworthy, given that it means that this most recently reported successful hit was then able to overcome the risks of detection and interception from the likes of S-400 or Pantsir air defense system. It also means that the jet overcame the concerns regarding electronic warfare systems that could potentially compromise the pilot's life and the mission's success. As a result, successful missions of this type means it then showcases a few newfound capabilities for Ukraine, including an enhanced strategic reach, an enhanced operational flexibility, providing a more diverse range of attack options, an improved deterrence and psychological impact. And last but not least, cause an impact on Russian military strategy, thereby forcing unwanted adaptations such as pulling back HQs, barracks, ammo dumps, training centers, and so forth. And it would also mean the reallocation of Russian defensive resources. As such, having all of these concerns spring up almost overnight, as Russia now finds itself having to fight on a more level playing field with Ukraine for this location just beyond Ukraine's borders. Then headed across quite east on the map for another update, a brief update on events from yesterday's embarrassing damage of a Russian Su-57 stealth jet in Astrakhan, with some further information from the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, which has stated that a second Su-57 may have been damaged in the process. But where things get really interesting here is from Russian telegrammers on the situation, stating quite a few things. Firstly, that yesterday's Su-57 incident was a result of invisible drones. But then went on to state that, unfortunately, not only the Su-57 was hit, but also a Pantsir S and an S-300 air defense system. Then, in referring back to the Su-57 jet, they stated that it appears it received serious damage and is currently being assessed or determined to see if it's even repairable. Either way, I'm sure the load of shrapnel it received from AFU drones didn't help with its specifically shaped design and radar-absorbing materials, therefore affecting its stealth characteristics. Then we'll head across into Ukraine, into the Sumy region, as in a swirling vortex of conflicting reports, Chechen leader Kadyrov has claimed that the Akhmat Chechnya regiment has captured a Ukrainian village, one that goes by the name of Ryzivka, right on the border with Russia. Kadyrov also published a video on his Telegram channel showcasing strikes on the village, concluding with a Russian soldier brandishing a Russian flag beside a sign reading Ryzivka City Council. However, so far, these claims remain unsubstantiated, with the head of the region insisting that Ryzivka remains firmly under Ukrainian control. So this is unusual. Although Kadyrov's Chechen TikTok army is no stranger to attempting to show off via social media one way or another. But all of this leads into a fantastic point, because what if Russia was to decide to open a new front into Ukraine on the northern border? Well, given the almost instant karmic return Russia received as it relates to Vovchansk and Belgorod, then for Russia to willingly start a new incursion somewhere else in the north by crossing country lines at a place like Rozivka leads to a situation of Russia knowingly welcoming in the same karmic return from the use of Western supplied arms as used by Ukrainian operators onto military sites just north of the Ukrainian border where Russia invaded Kharkiv. And since bullies only respond appropriately in the face of an opposing force of strength, then this bully would have to get realistic. Because with this new information in mind, Russia knows that although they could give a new incursion into Ukraine somewhere else in the north a try, they also now know that they expect a fierce militarized retaliation back onto Russian soil, which is really something they've not had to consider much before. All of which makes for an incredibly interesting dynamic, because Russia has been somewhat successful in positioning to the West that Ukraine can't do ABC, or for instance, use high precision, high payload Western weapons in Russia. Otherwise, Russia will retaliate or threaten to retaliate with a nuclear XYZ, or whatever the case may be. But now, with this new dynamic playing out in just the last couple of weeks or less, seems to very much place Russia on the opposite side of that equation now, at least as it pertains to northern border skirmishes, where a more equipped Ukraine is now saying, hey Russia, if you cross my northern border, I will immediately and effectively retaliate. And perhaps worst of all for Russia, embarrass them in the process. Now, it's always difficult to project into the future what will happen, but one such route Russia might instead now choose to take, literally, is to reinvigorate their commitment to focusing on eastern Ukraine's Donbass region. And then moving around on the map, just a little bit further east from this point, we move to the Vovchansk front lines, where we still see Russia doubling down on its former decisions. Because in a Russian military mobilization blunder-like moment, a Bloomberg report yesterday published that thousands of migrants and foreign students in Russia that are predominantly from Africa are being coerced into joining the fight. European officials speaking under anonymity revealed that Russian authorities are leveraging visa extensions as a means of pressure, reportedly having this segment of Russian society face the grim ultimatum: enlist in the military or face deportation. Now, Russia currently has about 40,000 migrants from Africa in its country, a move that aligns with Russia's broader strategy to enhance its influence in Africa through educational ties. It's also an approach that is reminiscent of Cold War-era tactics, where the Soviet Union offered educational opportunities to foster strong bilateral relations. So here we go again. First it was prisoners, then it was migrant workers from Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and a few other nations getting coerced into being mobilized. And now it's the African students too. All as Russia completely and shamelessly, and likely illegally, taps on any internal migrant resource it can find to aid its botched invasion of Ukraine. Then headed across or around the map, because somewhere in the east, a destroyed Russian armoured fighting vehicle was here. Possibly a BMP-3 or a tank based on the explosion, which was in fact disintegrating in the grey zone just mere kilometers from downtown Vovchansk. Then also for some Vovchansk activity, the Ukrainian military destroyed the Russian small-sized radio electronic station, the 1L122 Harman. Then we saw a destroyed Russian ATS tractor, which is typically used to tow artillery pieces, with a non-standard addition of a UMZ launcher on top, in the south of the Donetsk region. Then we also saw some Russian-provided footage, complete with angry emojis, putting on display a Russian Ural truck that was destroyed after a Ukrainian Baba Yaga drone visited them. Another car was destroyed in the process as well. There was also the almost identical example of a truck from separate footage, with Russian soldiers standing in front of the blaze after an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone. Although unlike the previous example, this one still has its doors intact and front cope cage installed, but there may have been a further final detonation after these images, leading to the same event. Then we also saw another Russian Buhanka van, aka the Loaf, which it is named after, that hit a mine travelling down the road. Although this event was almost definitely not due to an anti-tank mine, probably something smaller. given that the Buhanka van is still somewhat intact, apart from being upside down. Then headed across to a little bit of news for today. So Ukraine's air campaign against Russian forces has received a significant boost with the deployment of the GBU-39 SDB, a precision-guided munition supplied by the United States. According to Ukrainian officials, this advanced weapons system has achieved a remarkable 90% effectiveness rate on the battlefield. A key advantage of the GBU-39 lies in its compact size, which renders it an elusive target for Russian air defenses that have proven highly ineffective against such small munitions. So this stealth capability, combined with its extended range of over 110 kilometers, allows Ukrainian fighter jets to engage targets from safer distances while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. Moreover, the GBU-39's diminutive dimensions enables each aircraft to carry a larger payload, maximizing the number of precision strikes per sortie. Ultimately, this force multiplication effect has amplified Ukraine's aerial firepower, enabling more efficient and sustained strikes of Russian positions and their logistics networks. Now, this GBU-39 aviation-launched precision-guided munition doesn't get a lot of press, although I have mentioned it once before recently, with the biggest update on this front now being that it's had updates to attain that upgraded 90% effectiveness rate, allowing it to circumvent previous issues it had with electronic or satellite signal jamming, all in all making it an incredibly potent weapon for Ukraine's defense. Then moving across to a Russian hardware news update. So this is the state of the self-professed superpower that is Russia. An all-in-one transport device. Transfers your food and water, your weapons, and even the removal of the wounded from the raid. Their wording, not mine. They say it so casually like it's a common occurrence. Now, these uni-wheel trench runners were more of a historical curiosity and are not commonly used in modern military operations, as you might guess, as they were more experimental and niche in their application, particularly during the early to mid-20th century. Naturally, their practicality and efficiency are limited compared to other types of military vehicles. So, if only Russia was a country rich in natural oil and gas reserves, then maybe they could have bought a few extra of those Desert Cross golf buggies. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So Russian Z channels reported that 10 T-34 tanks have been brought to Belarus for its annual military parade in Minsk on July 3. Deputy Chief of Armament Sergei Tomchik of the Belarusian army stated that they are in excellent condition and ready for combat tasks if necessary. Is this a joke? What an odd thing to say, especially for an old World War II tank that's about 90 years old now. I also have my suspicions that Putin strong-armed Belarusian President Lukashenko, aka Crazy Uncle Luka, to give him all of these tanks on account of the Russian army's dwindling supplies. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens in Minsk on July 3rd. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, all of those good things. I appreciate it all and all the support, absolutely. And yeah, I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.